So I want to continue my series on domains in evolution in Burgundy by talking about Domaine Arnoux-Lachaux in Vosne-Romanée. Now this is an estate that's existed for a long time, since the mid-19th century in fact. They've been domain bottling the production since the late 1950s. They have incredible holdings in Vosne-Romanée and elsewhere. But it was really when the young Charles Lachaux came back to the family domain in late 2011 that something very exciting started to happen. And I find it particularly exciting because Charles Lachaux and I are exactly the same age, both 1989 vintage. It's very interesting to see a new generation getting involved in Burgundy and doing things on the highest level. So what Charles started doing was really initiating a revolution in the domain's vineyards. And one of the key platforms of that, along with farming organically, using Massal selections, severe debudding, limiting yields, was to start, instead of hedging the vines throughout the growing season repeatedly, as is the norm in Burgundy, to start raising the height of the trellising wires and rolling the canopies. So every time you cut a vine, you send a hormonal stress response through the plant that encourages vegetative growth. And by avoiding doing that, by letting the shoots grow and just rolling them back in on themselves, you encourage the plant to start phenolic maturation of the grapes sooner, encourage it to produce fruit. You get less second crop. And you also tend to get smaller berries with thicker skins and higher solids to juice ratio. So all very interesting things. And the idea behind all of these methods is to create fruit with higher natural acidities, lower yields, and higher concentration. And this really came to the fore in the 2018 vintage. Charles was able to pick very early, moderate alcohol, fully ripe, and then as a concomitant of these changes in the vineyard, he's really pulled back in the cellar. So shorter macerations, 100% whole cluster now, and already by 2012, his first vintage he'd vinified, he was starting to do appreciable percentages of whole cluster. And then élevage in much reduced amount of new oak. And I've got here the 2005, 2012, and 2018 Les Souchaux. This is in some ways, I think, the emblematic wine of the domain. They have very old vines here that always produce sort of small shot berries, Mirandange. And they used to call it the Grand Souchaux. In fact, I was on some of the earliest labels of the domain. Now they've gone back with 2018 to doing it. It's certainly absolutely merited for the 2018. But you can really see between the 5, the 12, and the 18, the progression. The 5 doesn't have that sort of asperity of tannin that some of the more structured extracted 5 still do to this day. But there definitely is plenty of extract. This has been entirely destemmed. And probably most noticeably, I think there's this sort of patina, or rather chocolatey patina of new oak and oak lactones that really frame the wine, but in quite an obtrusive way. Already with the 12, you see a slightly more filigree tannic structure. I would guess that, I haven't discussed this with Charles, but about half whole cluster for this, I'm assuming. Aromatic profile has evolved in a slightly less oaky direction, I'd say, but equally it still has quite a lot of those sort of chocolatey top notes. The wood is present, and imagine the cooperage choices that Charles made in 12 were perhaps not radically different from those his father were doing, at least in the style of oak, to not talk about the percentage. 2018, I think, is the year when you really see all of the viticultural changes and winemaking changes coalescing to create something very, very special indeed, something that is able to achieve the sort of aromatic range of the very, very best wines of Vosne-Romanée, the sort of thing you associate with Domaine Arnoux-Lachaux Conti, Loire, some bottles from Bizot, the sort of floral top notes, the orange rind, the exotic spices, but not coming from barrels because the level of new oak radically reduced by 2018. And I think maceration's barely, certainly not even 2 weeks. Yet the wine has incredible concentration, has the structure to last 60 or 70 years without any sense of weight, and certainly above all in 2018, not that sort of ponderous sucrosity of fruit, which I think for me is the fault with 18 as a red Burgundy vintage. It's a sort of just unavoidable mid-palate sweetness that is rather cloying to drink. This wine has none of that, and it's representative of the portfolio. I mean, it was incredible portfolio. I tasted them just after they'd been racked to tank from bottling, which is never a very flattering time to try a new vintage, and I was just blown away by them. And this confirms all of the promise I saw back in November of last year. People who are not acquainted with the wines, I think word is already certainly out there. The prices of the wines are starting to get already pretty elevated. However, it's absolutely worth trying some of these bottles. I think they're really some of the most exciting wines being made in the Côte de Nuits today.